we're going to go through problems. I think that's the best way to learn it, okay? This really, can you tell this is not a tough chapter? Let's take E5A, okay? The accounts and balances that follow are from Kelman Company's general ledger. We need to compute the working capital and the current ratio. So guys, what is the first thing we need to do? In order to compute the working capital, don't we need to know current assets minus current liabilities? So let's first decide what our total current assets are. What are we going to look at here, guys? Just current assets. Cash, 1,200.
Prepaid insurance.
Perfect.
Notes receivable 90 days,
Yep.
not the 2 years because it's over a year.
Yep. And accounts receivable, right? So aren't we going to want to take, I'm sorry, in our marketable securities, we didn't talk about this, but not long-term investments, marketable securities that we are exchanging on the market currently. We're going to take our current assets, which include cash, marketable securities, the 90-day notes receivable, our accounts receivable, our merchandise inventory, our prepaid insurance, and our supplies will give us total current assets of $61,160. Now the key to knowing these ratios is to know what a current asset is. Okay? So what we go over here in class is what the only thing you'll be tested on. Then we also need to know what the current liabilities are. So as you see here, the long-term portion of our notes payable, the long-term portion, current liabilities, the short-term portion of our notes payable, the accounts payable, the current portion of our long-term debt, salaries payable, property taxes payable. Now, why would that be a current liability? I'll guarantee you don't pay your property taxes within the current period. They're going to come and take away your home, put a lien on it. And then the unearned revenue. Those will total our current liabilities. So you want me to make this a little bigger?
No, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So working capital is basically current assets minus current liabilities. The difference is our working capital, 25.6. Be able to know how to compute this. I'm going to tell you right now, that will be something you have to do. I'll give you a list just like this, and you'll have to figure out what the working capital is. The current ratio is the same thing. We're going to need to know our current assets, and we're going to divide them by our current liabilities, or the $61,160 divided by our current liabilities of $35,560. That gives us our current ratio. That make sense?
So we have our current asset is
160. and we divide that by our current liabilities, which is $35,560.
Divided.
Okay. Now, we can do the same E6, and I have that available for you on the D2L. So it's doing the same thing, and it makes you come up with the profit margin, asset turnover. The key here is to know what constitutes the various ratios. What is it you need to come up with profit margin? Okay? Isn't it net income divided by total sales? Or what is asset turnover? So each one of these, you want to understand how you go about computing them. What I am going to do, though, is let's look at E7A. Here it gives us the information in the asset, or in the balance sheet, and the owner's equity. And we are supposed to compute the liquidity measures of working capital and current ratio. And it lets us know that the total assets at the beginning of the period were 180, and the total owner's equity at the beginning of the period was 140, okay? So if we need to compute working capital, what is it we need to compute working capital? Working capital is current assets minus
Current liability.
perfect. So current assets are
220,000.
on E7A,
E7. Okay.
50.
50. I'm sorry, we're on E7.
Oh,
That's okay. I think I said I was just talking about E6 is similar, where you have to know the assets, but in E7 we're going to make it a little easier for us. So current assets are 50,000.
yes,
Current liabilities are
20.
20 or 30? 20. So our working capital is 30,000. Now, to come up with the current ratio, we're going to take current assets of 50,000 divided by current liabilities of 20,000, aren't we? Right? So if we take 50,000 divided by 20,000, we come up with 2.5. Okay?
Oh, we should have just all this easy.
Next, it wants, part 2 wants us to compute some profitability ratios. The first one is profit margin. Who can look and see how we compute profit margin?
Net income over revenue.
Net income divided by revenue. So if we go here, we see our net income. Let's go back here. Our net income on our income statement shows net income is 25,000, doesn't it? And our net sales are 410,000. So our profit margin of net income divided by net sales, 25,000 divided by 410,000 equals 6.1%. Bless you. Asset turnover. Let's look at what we use to compute asset turnover.
Revenue divided by total assets.
Correct. So our revenues of 410,000. Now we have to calculate our average total assets. Do you see at the end of the year our total assets were 220,000? See that in the book? But it told us at the beginning of the period total assets were 180. Didn't they? We have to come up with our average total assets. So do you see here? We take our 220 plus our 180 divided by 2. That's going to be 200,000, isn't it? So our net sales of 410, divide that by our total average assets. The beginning of the period plus the end of the period, divide that by 2. And our asset turnover here is 2.1. Next, return on assets. Our return on assets is going to be not our sales, but our net income. Our net income divided by our average total assets that we got from above, that 200,000. Net income is 25,000. Our total average assets are 200,000. You divide 25 divided by 200, you get 12.5%. Then our debt to equity ratio, our total liabilities show here of 50,000. Then we've got total owner's equity is how much? 170. So our liabilities to our total owner's equity, 50,000 divided by 170,000 is 29.4. Then our return on equity is our net income, and we can divide that by our average owner's equity. So we ended the year with 170,000 owner's equity. The beginning of the year owner's equity was 140. So 170 plus 140, divide that by 2. 155. 25,000, divide that by 155, gives us 16.1%.
Okay, Nancy, I got a question.
Yes.
So once we have these, we have this ratio of, let's say, profit margin, 6.1%. What do we base that on?
Well, the only way we really can compare it is to compare it within years. So let's say in 2013 their profit margin was 6.1%. But in 2013 it was 6.2%. 2012 it was 6.8%. You wonder, users use that information to see, are they becoming more profitable or less, and why? Does that make sense?
Okay.
So the purpose of this is you want to be profitable, and you want to look at comparisons to see, are they getting better at profitability or are they getting worse? And if you compare it between companies, you're going to generally want to invest in a company who's becoming more profitable. here's another thought. You're a banker. And their profitability today is 6.1%, but in the prior 3 years it was 12%.
What happened?
What happened? Do you want to lend them money? What's going on? Is this bad management? Is this just tough economic times and more competition? What's the competition doing? Do you see? So this information is utilized to compare to make decisions.
So if you use the example of, what were those movie joints? Blockbuster. Yeah, and 5 years ago there was 2 Blockbusters down the block. Now there aren't any Blockbusters.
Mhm.
Or use Radio Shack. Radio Shack is closing.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a thing where they looked at it and
They just can't make money. And it's logical. Blockbuster has lost profitability just because they don't have the demand anymore. Their market is outdated. It's a technology piece. The internet is taking over so much that people aren't going and renting movies anymore. They're just downloading them or using Netflix. So technology has changed or products have changed that have forced them out of the market. Now, realistically, Blockbuster should have done something a long time ago to have been the new Netflix. Netflix was smart. They did a little bit of both. They would mail DVDs to you as they were developing this online presence. Blockbuster just wasn't creative enough, and they're out of the game.
There's Blockbuster, like red boxes though. So like red box, and there's Blockbuster's version of red box that are at a lot of come and goes.
I didn't know that.
So they're still trying to kick it, but.
And Redbox is, they have a unique product in that you can still rent them, but their overhead is so cheap. It's in a little red box. There's no customers and no overhead. There's no salaries. I mean, there's some, but very minimal. So they've really been, what?
They're probably just paying the whatever business it is just to have that.
But no, Vudu, you can get a movie on Vudu for cheaper than you can get it at like Walmart.
Isn't that amazing?
So that's going to take over that's all I use now is Vudu because I used to buy it.
You can buy movies on
Vudu.
Hulu.
Yeah, it's so much cheaper and you get the same quality. You can get an HD and all sorts of stuff.
They use Amazon.
Guys, instead of doing problem 1, I want to switch it to problem 2. That is more relevant to what we're doing. So for your homework, for chapter 2, I want it to be problem 2, okay? Chapter 5, I'm sorry. Problem 2 only, okay? Not problem 1. Any questions with what we're doing, guys? Is it making sense? Okay, so